Hey there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Happy Shochu'sday from both of us here in Japan. It's episode number 136, where we're going to talk about dilution, but first we've got some announcements and booze news and those sorts of things. So, happy Wednesday morning. How
Happy
you doing?
Tuesday evening. Good. How are you, Christopher?
Hanging in there.
Is it
Um,
is it cold and rainy up there like it is down here?
it's not, it is cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I saw somebody last night saying there was a threat of snow cover this
Oh,
morning.
nice.
Yeah. And we've already got people chiming in. Mark on YouTube
What's going
is
on with my hair?
drinking SG Shochu Emo 38% on the rocks. Excellent
Nice.
choice.
The rocks give him dilution. He said no dilution, but they're not diluted. But he's getting his dilution from his ice if he
Well,
drinks
it's
slowly.
big. Yeah,
If he sips
depending on
slowly,
how
sips on
quickly.
kaku.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Sip
Cool.
slowly.
Yeah.
Sip
That's
honkaku.
cool. That's a fun one. Um, yeah. It's been raining here a lot recently, so I wouldn't mind a little snow rather than rain. I'm doing my walks after every meal, and
Mhm.
the last 3 or 4 nights in a row when I go out for my walk, it's been just like misty and drizzly and very London-esque. Chill in the air. Very few runners. The
Uh huh.
running track's a little bit soggy, but it's okay for a walk. And I just, wear synthetic fabrics and a ball cap and keep my head down so my glasses don't fog up. But
Yep.
yeah, I'm
Cover your
sticking at it.
neck and your head.
Sticking at it. It's I don't know. I don't know if I'm seeing any real effects yet, but according to the scale, I'm down almost 1 kilogram or about 2 pounds in the first,
Burn them calories.
yep, 2.5 weeks of the year. So, yeah, given that I gained 3 kilos last year, but close to 7 pounds, I think it'd be good if I can drop those again. I could just be losing muscle too, because I'm not running. I haven't run yet this year. And I realize I've been playing. I don't know how much I talk about this on the live stream, but I know on other venues I do that I play tennis, and I play once a week at the tennis school here. We do a group lesson, and um, I get really sore. I think I was in a constant state of soreness last year because I was running so frequently.
Hmm.
And now that I've stopped running, my knees are not bothering me, my back isn't bothering me, and then I played tennis on Monday, and it's now Wednesday, and I woke up and got out of bed. And it's like, that still kind of hurts. So recovery
Hmm.
takes longer as you get older.
Sure.
Um,
Rub some shochu on it.
yeah,
Uh, and we've got
yeah,
drinking some Coca Cola.
yeah.
There you
That
go.
doesn't sound healthy.
Hey, yeah. Um, don't blend it with any good shochu. That would be my only advice.
Okay.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
Is there any booze news just to keep things rolling here? Let me find that. Where is that thing? There it
Yeah, I
is.
think we got one. I think there was an
Yeah,
announcement yesterday, right, from the
yeah. There's a
Komasa, from
Yeah, and
Konosuba
I
Distillery.
had not been paying attention to this. This was initially announced, as far as I can tell, on Twitter uh, by Kanosuke, which
Hmm.
is under the Komas umbrella. I guess technically it's a separate distillery, but they make Kanosuke whiskey down in Kagoshima. And I'll just show the what I had seen just recently on Kanosuke's Twitter. If you don't follow them, you can join the other 6,566 people that are paying attention. They just announced that this is coming. Can you see? I just expanded this. Did the picture get bigger?
It did.
Okay, so
Yeah.
their first, what they're calling a year-round release, is gonna drop today.
Okay.
And this, as you can see, is Kanosuke single malt Japanese whiskey, no E, and pretty. Yeah, I mean, guaranteed it's gonna be tasty. Everything
Yep.
else they've released thus far is really good, so this is, I'm sure, exceptional. And I don't know what the price point is, but it is interesting to see, as you pointed out before we went live. It is interesting to see that they've gotten around to and a brand that's not one of their one-offs, one of their
Hmm.
single barrels or whatever else they were doing. They've been doing over the
Yep.
past couple of years.
Yeah, a lot of limited releases the
Yeah,
last few
and
years.
they were super pricey at first.
Yeah.
for such young spirit, up around 14,000 yen on the shelf
Yeah.
for some of the
And
first ones.
I'll be curious on the pricing on this and how old it is and all the specs on it. So we'll have to do a little bit more research, find out. But yeah, that's that. I think that they did things right, that they didn't try to get a main brand out right away. So they were keeping those barrels in reserve to get some older stock before they started releasing a brand that people would expect to have consistent supply. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's good news out of Kanosuke, and I recognize the picture or the location anyway. For those of you who haven't been or haven't seen the Kanosuke distillery, it's right on the coast, and so that wood, it's sitting on a railing, and those are actually like the plants that are growing up around it are actually the plant cover on the dunes just before you get to the beach. Like
Yep.
it gives that vibe of almost like it almost reminds me of like what is it? I can't remember the name of the place now. Hilton Head, South Carolina, that part of the U.S. where you got
Mm-hmm.
these sand dunes covered with growth that keeps the sand in place, and yeah, it's a pretty place. It's definitely worth a visit if you find yourself in Kagoshima, as everyone should at some point. You should go down there and enjoy the local food and drink. And there's a lot of history and a lot of nature. It's a nice part of the country. And there's a Shinkansen that goes there, so there's no excuses. They even have an airport.
They do, which is nowhere near the Shinkansen station, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Minor oversight.
Yeah, well, they had different priorities at different times, I guess, when they planned those things.
I've been talking to shochu makers about this. Why did they stick the airport out there? Why isn't it
Yeah.
closer to downtown? And there's a bunch of theories and a bunch of stories. There's it's pretty common consternation going around about the location of the airport.
Yeah.
And
It's a
they're
solid how far by bus from
40
downtown?
minutes. It's
40
40
minutes by
minutes
bus,
from
yeah.
downtown. Yeah. So, it's not horrible. There's worse. I mean, Tokyo's airports are or at least Narita is further. So,
Yeah,
unless
right,
I mean,
right.
it's about the same if you take the not it's not a Shinkansen, but it is a pretty quick train from the Keisei on the Keisei line.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick. It's about 40 minutes, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's is that the one from Nitori Station? Is that right? Or is it a different
it's
one?
Nitori is a furniture company. Nippori,
Nippori, yeah. See, I've never lived in Tokyo.
but yeah, it does go through there. It terminates at Ueno Station,
Okay.
on the Yamanote line. But at 30, I think they clock it at 39 minutes or something. So it's about the same. But then you're in Ueno. You're not. I mean, it's not a horrible part of town, but I don't think I don't think that's where anybody's headed.
Some people live there.
Yeah, I guess some people probably do. The zoo lives there, so hey, there's that. I guess.
It's a nice. There's a nice Japanese wine izakaya in that area that I profiled in my book. Only been there a couple times, but a solid like yakitori and wine kind of place. Wasn't bad. Mark Carlson makes the point that the airport in Kagoshima is close to Kirishima, and I wonder if that was part of the calculus. Was that that's a big tourist destination for domestic tourism?
Possibly.
To get it up into those mountains with all the nature and the onsen resorts and things. So.
The only thing, I mean, nobody talks about why it's up there. They talk about why it's not closer to Kagoshima City.
Yeah.
And so those are interesting stories to hear and theories to hear. But apparently it almost was placed a lot closer to the city.
Yeah.
I'm sure competing things such as the blowing ash from the rather active volcano and money are large components here. But I would love for somebody to dig a bit deeper into there. And ancillary to that, why is there not some sort of rail solution going directly to the airport from downtown and potentially Kirishima and other places that would significantly, not that the buses aren't fine, except for when they get so packed that middle row of seats has to flip down, which is annoying. But it is a little bit, it's a little bit too far out there, which is annoying. Other places that suffer from this problem would be Nagasaki's airport is way too far away from the city center. And then
never flown into
Oita is annoyingly far from downtown Oita City. That's stupid. So it's just like there's I don't know how I'm sure it was business interests and
Yeah.
politics all over the place
Yeah, yeah.
dragging these things to where they are. But hey,
Cheap jobs, rural employment. There's lots of reasons why things like this happen. And it's
cheaper land. Yeah.
yeah. And I guess the volcano thing does kind of make sense because because Sakurajima belches a lot. So if you don't want to disrupt your flights and have to ground aircraft and things like that because of big plumes of ash over the city, then yeah, a little further north does make sense. I like your idea of a rail spur though that runs straight up from central Kagoshima City to the airport, then cuts over to Kirishima. Make that loop. That would be really convenient for lots of people.
Oh yeah.
I guess I'm fortunate in the fact that I live in Kyushu, so I don't ever fly to Kagoshima.
Yeah.
Um,
I am annoyingly intimate with all of these airports. So yeah, I've been to most of them. And
so fly into Hakata, fly into
yeah,
Fukuoka, and take the Shinkansen down. It only double the place your trip.
only doubles it, and only doubles the length too, more than doubles. But anyway,
No,
it's
about 20 minutes longer. It's only an hour and 15. By the time you get your bags, get on the bus,
oh, I see. Yeah, but
wait for
Kagoshima
the
is
bus.
is the same length of time from Tokyo.
The flight, you mean?
Yeah, because it's just coming straight across basically.
Sure.
So it's
I hear
it's
you.
prettle close to the same.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I
that's
just want you in Fukuoka more. That's a selfish request.
I appreciate that. I don't
Yeah.
don't mind being in Fukuoka. Um, let's see. What's the main event today? Main event, dilution
Yeah.
before bottling.
Yeah. Before we get into that, though, I do want to. Well, actually, this is apropos. I because I do talk about it. I talked about it. So we have a new podcast episode that just came out
We do.
yesterday.
Hold on, let me
Or I
find.
guess maybe this morning for folks in the States. And it's an odd topic compared to what we normally talk about. We actually talked about essentially, I guess if I was to summarize, it would be mindful drinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like how to get the most out of it, how to enjoy your drink without overindulging, and just something I've been reflecting on. And we talk about why on the episode and that sort of thing. But a lot of the research that we did for the episode is actually in this book by Adam Rogers, which Christopher's been recommending to me for
Couple of
years, and
years at
I,
least. Yeah.
I finally picked it up last time I was in the States, and it's the science of booze, and I'd say 80% of it is like booze production and what's happening and what are congeners and how does that affect flavor and aroma and different decisions that are made by the distiller and all that sort of thing. But then the latter couple chapters are really about the effects on the human body, what alcohol is doing scientifically to our livers, our kidneys, our heart, our brain, and everything, and what's the good and the bad, right? Because there are
Mm-hmm.
upsides to modest alcohol consumption, and then there are downsides to heavy alcohol consumption. And
Mm-hmm.
as an epidemiologist, it's always been a little bit of a, I guess, um, a little bit of a disconnect for me to be someone who trained in public health, and the job of a public health practitioner is to improve the public's health, but then to be promoting alcohol, which a lot of public health practitioners actively try to get people to stop drinking or to greatly reduce their alcohol consumption. So
Yeah.
for me, it's always been a little bit of a disconnect. And so I felt like taking a look at it, reflecting, having a conversation about it, because we love these drinks, we absolutely love the people that make them. We think that they're an amazing part of Japanese culture and the whole experience of Japanese culinary traditions and everything else. So we're going to continue to talk about them, but we also want to stop every once in a while and say, hey, wait a minute, let's make sure that we're drinking responsible and we're encouraging our listeners to drink responsibly, and
Mm-hmm.
we offer some tips and that sort of thing. So it was a interesting episode to talk about. It actually took us longer to edit and record because we wanted to make sure that we got everything right. I think we still might not be 100% on some of the science behind it because I'm not a biochemist. You're not a biologist. We're not trained in this sort of thing. And but essentially, we're encouraging folks to take a minute, read a book like this, um, you know, read up on it, figure out what's going on, and just enjoy these drinks responsibly. So that's what the latest episode is, which I'll be curious to see how people respond. Right, it's a
Mm.
little bit of a different approach, and of course, because we are the Japan Distilled podcast, we tried to get get on like what how Japanese alcohol and Japanese drinking culture can actually enhance this, how it can help you drink mindfully. So I think it was a fun episode, but also just a little different for us. So anyway, enough
Long as
about that.
hell too.
It was when we finished recording, it was what, close to an hour and 20 minutes, I think, but we got it
Did
down
what?
to I think we got it down to an hour, or just under an hour. So
That's
just
impressive.
break it up in chunks. Yeah, we do a little
Yeah.
experiment during the show. That was fun.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yep. No, I think a long past due getting on the record on that one, and basically, if I can summarize, I would say it's to sip slowly and sip honkaku. You just need to go for drink the good stuff. Just keep that in mind. You know, life is too short. Drink the good stuff. Don't
Sure.
drink too fast. Savor and
Mhm.
enjoy, and drink lots of water. And that's what we're going to talk about next anyway, is water
Mhm.
usage in the shochu and awamori world in particular. Although I think I want to start when I talk about dilution. And I know that this is a confusing thing for a lot of people out there, because they quickly learn, as soon as they ask the question, why is most shochu bottled at 25% ABV? Why is most awamori bottled at 30% ABV? And they soon after learn that, well, it's diluted to that point
Mhm.
and then bottled. And they're like, well, why do you need to dilute it? And let me start by saying pretty much, pretty much all spirits are diluted. All right.
Mhm. Mhm.
You will see things that are called cask strength or still strength, or referred to it
Mhm.
as such. Those maybe are not, at
Yeah.
least not in
Or,
any appreciable way.
or like
However, pretty much
barrel
everything
proof.
else
Yeah.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
barrel proof.
Barrel proof is another way. Yeah.
Yep. But dilution is normal in the spirits world. And if you do the math, the actual amount of water added to shochu and awamori is less than what is common in much of the rest of the industry. But we don't need to get into that. I think there are more important reasons for dilutions, and that's what we're just going to riff on a little bit today.
Yep. No, that's a great bit of context setting. I mean, I think the biggest culprit on dilution is probably Korean soju and or korui shochu, right? Because those are taking essentially industrial distillate up in the 90s, 90% plus alcohol, and diluted down to the teens or the low 30s or mid 30s at most. And that's a huge amount of water that's been added to those drinks. And then, of course, vodka, similar industrial distillate, or not necessarily always industrial. Some there's quote unquote craft vodka where they're using like multiple distillation through multiple times to a pot still, rather than using a big massive uh, refinery still for a column. And that's again diluted down, maybe from 96, 97% ethanol to 40% or 42 or 46 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then now when you get to a double pot distillation, like a whiskey or tequila, rum, a lot of those pot distilled products, then your alcohol percentage might be what, in the 60s or 70s after
Mm-hmm.
distillation, and then you're diluting again down to 50s or 40s, and so decently heavy dilution. Christopher has some place to go, so I'll just keep talking.
No, I'm
And
I'm I'm here. I took a delivery.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then
Sorry.
so
Keep riffing.
yeah, so then when you've got a single pot distillation, like a sweet potato shochu in particular, you're at 36, 37% off the still, and you're diluting down to 25%. So you're
Mm-hmm.
actually, as Christopher said, you're not getting as much dilution as you would in some of these other traditions, or at least equivalent. So yeah, it's interesting to think about. Now, maybe a little bit of a twist on that is, why is it 25%? And I've mentioned this many times before, but it's
Yeah.
almost entirely driven by tax,
Yep.
right? It both you have a lower tax rate, so you have a lower price on the shelf. You also have a lower price on the shelf because you're stretching your spirits run further, right?
Yeah.
So you've got, what would yield X number of bottles is now yielding X plus Y, and then that gives you more product to sell. So there are incentives to sell it at that strength. But as we've talked about before, and I'm sure some of you remember, a lot of shochu, especially pre-war or earlier post-war, was bottled at higher proof. Right? Drinking styles have changed, almost nudged by tax revenue considerations. And then also maybe drinking styles have changed. We don't know a whole lot about how people were drinking, but they were still, or if people were just getting more drunk, right? Were you drinking a 35% sweet potato shochu at a 50-50 hot water dilution for your oiwadi, and now you're doing a 50-50 dilution for 25%? So you're just getting less alcohol per drink. I don't know. But or maybe there was more heavier dilution when it was 35%. So the customer was stretching it and getting more for their dollar than the distillery stretching it.
I'd be willing to believe that a Southern Kyushu person working a full day's work back in the 1950s worked a hell of a lot harder than I do in 2023 and needed that shochu a hell of a lot more than I do in 2023. So I'm sure they would have appreciated the higher octane versions more than, or they would have needed it more than I do, just to wash the day away. But yeah, I mean, the tax man gets involved in a lot of alcohol law around the world, as we are all aware. And the 25% point there, that bottling proof is largely because of them or him or her or they, whoever, whatever. But everything kind of coalesced around that, and the dilution is a normal part of the distillery day. So what does that look like, Stephen, when we've got our spirit that has been designated for packaging? What's the process there?
Yeah, so virtually every distillery that we're aware of does not dilute until shortly before bottling, because it's more efficient, it's more cost effective to store the higher proof distillate in a tank or in a cask or in a ceramic pot. You get more alcohol per liter into the containers, and then you reduce storage space basically by doing that. And now it varies widely what happens next, because some distilleries will so typically whatever they're going to bottle gets moved from the storage tank into a dilution tank. And then the amount of water that's added will be used to reconcile whatever the storage strength was to what the bottling strength will be. And at a place like Yamato Zakura, he has no space. He can't, if he's got to fulfill orders and he's got a bunch of different products that he needs to bottle over a week or two, he doesn't have a bunch of different tanks to put that and rest before bottling. So he actually ends up diluting one day and bottling the next. So he's basically doing very, very quick dilution to get from storage to bottle, because he just doesn't have the space. But then our friends down at Furusawa Distillery, which we profiled in episode 49 of the podcast, they've got lots of space and they make lots of products. So they have lots of different dilution tanks, and they will rest for a minimum of 14 days, 2 weeks before they bottle after dilution, because they want the water and the spirit to meld, to marry. They would say marry
each other,
right? And it mellows the spirit out when you do that. Now in Yamato Zakura, that's happening in the bottle, right? But if you open that bottle as soon as you get it from the, like if it arrives so you bottle it on Monday, it arrives at the liquor store on Tuesday, and a customer takes it home on Wednesday, that's only 2 days after dilution. And that's possible, and I'm sure that has happened. But with Furusawa, you're definitely a minimum of 2 weeks after, 16 days probably after dilution that is your first chance to try it. Now, how much would Yamato Zakura change in the bottle over those first couple of weeks? Probably not much. Maybe a little bit of mouthfeel change. but and I'm sure there are distilleries that actually rest the diluted shochu longer before bottling. But Furusawa is one of the longer that I'm aware of. Um, so
Yeah.
anyway, that's kind of the process for how it's done.
And what kind of water is being used for this dilution?
It's typically the same water that they're using uh, for their fermentations. It's the same water being used to make the spirit, and that water is typically chosen because of its softness and its balance of mineral content.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dilution adds to the experience. If you drink something that's storage strength, so genshu, right, undiluted shochu, all of the water in that bottle is distilled. It's all distilled water. You don't have any of the residual mouthfeel of the water that was used to make the product. So
Mm-hmm.
when you dilute, you're actually adding some mouthfeel. You're adding some texture, some minerality, not something that's necessarily detectable in taste, but it's certainly in feel. And so
Mm-hmm.
you'll taste some shochu that's made with very, very soft water, and the shochu itself becomes soft when it's diluted to 25%. And I can tell you from experience that if I use the same water when I'm at Yamato Zakura, I have this. This is a treat for me. I can make my oyuwari with the same water that's being used to make the shochu,
Mm.
right? And then I'm doubling up on the same uh, softness, the same water quality. That what was used in dilution is also going into my glass for hot water, and that's really cool. Um, and so this is, I've one of my dreams, and this is a silly dream maybe, is I would love to be able to bottle distillery strike water, the spring water that they use for different distilleries, and have that available for people overseas.
Yeah, no, we have talked about this a bit, and I've even talked directly to some two of the most famous water sources in southern Japan to see what's possible. They've expressed interest because they're like, yeah, we got plenty of the water, so we'd be happy to package it for overseas. So
Yep.
it absolutely is possible, and you know me, I've spent the last couple of years going through different shikomimizu offerings that are available online here in
Mm-hmm.
Japan.
Yep.
So, and one of my favorite things when I'm in Kagoshima is to go through and pick these up. You can sometimes buy them at bottle shops. There are vending machines that have them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's nice to. There's something that's fun to do, and
Yep.
it isn't. I've heard of people becoming water sommeliers and that sort of thing, but really,
Yeah.
when you sip a glass of strike water or
Mm-hmm.
shikomimizu, really think about what's going on there,
Mm-hmm.
and how much mineral can you detect? Probably not a whole lot from southern Japan, to
Right.
be quite fair.
It's very soft. Yeah.
Yeah, but how round is it? What's the mouth feel of it? These things
Mm-hmm.
do contribute to the shochu or the awamori that you
Yep.
are enjoying, and it is in to varying degrees intentional.
Mm-hmm.
They are creating a consistent product by blending with this groundwater or well water, spring
Mm-hmm.
water that is below the distillery, and the one I guess one thing that I've realized, because I do ask makers questions about water, and one thing that I've realized over the couple of decades I've been paying attention is that there's a lot more thought that goes into the quality of that water.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been interesting to see that evolution, because when I first arrived in Japan, and this was very different from my experiences as a beer brewer in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
people didn't think they took the water for granted. Like, everybody takes water for clean drinking water. Everybody takes that
Yep.
for granted, I think, in the
Sure. Sure.
in our world anyway.
Yep.
And I think what is starting to happen is, along with the new attention to yeast strains, is people are saying, well, and Mark Carlson highlights it, why I threw his comment up here, is that, yeah, water is part of that story of place,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that spring, wherever that water is being drawn from, has its own story.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking millennia of story in
Yep.
terms of the different, the amount of natural filtration that happens underground, these
Mm-hmm.
aquifers. And you'll find these days that now more than ever, there are places that are super, super proud of their water source, and
Mm-hmm.
they talk about it and they name it. These water sources have very well-known names. My favorite right now is the one out on Koshikijima, the the sweet potato shochu brand
Mm-hmm.
Goro. It uses hotaru mizu.
Mm-hmm.
They're very proud to call it hotaru mizu, which of course hotaru means firefly. So it's
Mm-hmm.
firefly water. That's how they brew it and dilute it with firefly water. Of course, firefly water, fireflies are only attracted to the most pristine
Mm-hmm.
and untouched of water sources. Is what how the claim goes, and so hotaru mizu is the basis for goro, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is a lot of fun. And I guess it's kind of similar across those two major islands in Koshiki because there are serious synergies between Goro, which is made in the south, and Rokudaime Yuri, which is made in the north. Even though
Mm-hmm.
they're geographically quite displaced,
Mm-hmm.
that water, man, just it creates a flavor profile that I haven't gotten from any other sweet potato shochu anywhere.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I had a couple of bottles of Godo recently, picked them up, and they disappeared quickly. That's a really, really good drink. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it
Now,
certainly
yeah,
is. Oh, I
I
have a bottle of it here too, just so, in case
oh, you've
people
got
are.
oh
I
yeah,
do have the. This is brand new in the States too, so
yeah, you've got the export label. Yeah, I think I've already
it's too shiny. I can't.
I've already disposed of my
There it is.
domestic label bottles that I had. Um, yeah, cool. The another thing that happens, and I think this is something people should look out for. It happens. I see it a lot with sake as well. Uh, you'll walk up on a sake brewery and there'll be a little kind of bubbling fountain outside,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
actually them offering the water to the local community to have a sip or to fill a water jug and take home. When we visited the Kirishima distillery, the makers of Kuru Kirishima, last year, they had this entire almost production line where people were driving up with a bunch of 5 gallon jugs or 5 liter jugs and filling them, and they were taking all this
There was a
water home.
line.
There was a
Yeah,
line, and they actually
yeah.
have a queue. They have an actual like roped off queue for people to line up and wait and get their water. And I had I had a water bottle that I had mostly finished by the time we finished the tour. So I emptied that and I went and I filled it up and I was drinking their strike water for the rest of the day, and it was really, really nice.
Yep.
So
Yep.
keep an eye out on that too. I remember the first time I think I saw that for shochu was when I visited the makers of Isanishiki
Uh huh.
up in Isa, and they had the same thing where people just driving up, piling water jugs out of their cars, loading up on the water, and taking it
Yeah.
home.
Okuchi Shuzo. Yep.
Yep.
Kuroi Sanishiki. That's a pretty standard brand in Kagoshima. Love it. Yeah. So, um, to bring this home, I guess the dilution part of the shochu story is not to be discounted. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
important part of the overall the balance of that brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
don't is not for nothing. The 25%, the 30% version of these brands is the standard. And
Right.
I think they make it many times when they're making these brands, they are really thinking about how is this going to taste? How is it going to present after dilution?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important to consider. The water, while I'm sure at first when these tax laws were put into place, it almost felt punitive to the makers. Maybe in some cases they had to bring it down to 25 to just get to a tax level, a levied tax level, a sales tax level where it wasn't going to launch the price of the product into the stratosphere for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But over the ensuing decades, you have a culture built around it, a food and a drinks culture built around it, around the 25 or 30% ABV point, and you have generations of toji making it to taste best at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these places don't release Genshu
Mm-hmm.
because that's not really what they have in mind when they're making it, I think. Now some of them do sometimes. Some places won't release Shinshu. Why? Because maybe the Shinshu isn't very nice. Other places won't release the Genshu all the time because maybe it just isn't seasonally isn't up to snuff. So don't turn your nose up at dilution. It is a very normal part of spirits production in general, and to a certain extent where taxes are concerned, it's prescribed.
Yep. No, I think that's a great point. And as we did talked about, it also, I think the mindset has shifted where it's now you can stretch more, you can get more product, more bottles out of a single run. So they're stretching the amount of product that they can sell. And so in some ways it's become a benefit to the makers, but you're right, it was driven by tax. But you're right, these drinks are designed for that dilution, but not just that dilution. They're designed for further dilution.
Yeah, true.
Right? It's pretty incredible that when you take a 25%, let's just say a barley shochu, right? Like an atmospheric distilled barley shochu at 25%. It's already been cut from 42, 43% down to 25 before bottling. So you got at least 40% dilution there. You can then do a 50-50 hot water mix and bring it down to 12.5%.
Mm-hmm.
And it still expresses beautifully.
Yeah.
That's gone from 42 or 43 to 12. And it still expresses that beautifully. That's the beauty of single pot distillation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
No doubt. Dilution
if
after bottling too.
Yeah. If you want to play around with this dilution concept at home, here's an idea. It just came to me as Christopher was talking. Find a higher proof shochu. Find something that's bottled either at
Genshu.
At Genshu, or maybe something like SG Shochu was mentioned earlier. I don't believe that those are Genshu. I think that those are actually slightly diluted.
Yeah, they are.
They might be, but it might be diluted from 43 to 40, something like that. So find something in that range, maybe a 35%, if you can't get your hands on something else, and find different bottled waters that you have available. Get Evian. Get a distilled
Evian's
water.
relatively hard compared to a lot of the strike water here.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And that's what I would do is I would look for waters that sort of promote their water hardness or their softness. So find like 2 or 3 different examples of that, and then line up 3 glasses, and make equal proportion dilution with that. You don't have to heat the water, you don't have to cool the water, just room temperature, and see what those different water qualities do to your mouthfeel and your experience with that drink. And you might discover, I really like this shochu with that water.
Yeah.
And you start to find other ways. And this is a little bit of what we talked about at the top of the show, is the mindfulness, right? Working through, understanding the drink and finding ways to appreciate it and really thinking about what you're drinking and what makes it special.
Yeah.
And this is another way to do that is that focused attention to how you're enjoying the drink.
And this is what people will do when they're again. We've moved fully into dilution after bottling. We started before bottling, now after bottling. And when people do maiwari, when they are pre-diluting a bottle of shochu for use, 48, 72 hours later, maybe a week later, they often will get the water from the distillery and use that to dilute their shochu for serving later. It does make a difference, especially once you give it time to mingle in the new vessel. It really does have a quantifiable effect on the whatever you end up drinking or sipping from your cup. But that was a very interesting and in-depth discussion of before and after dilution. You got anything else? Really, any final thoughts on that?
Well, no. I guess my only thought is, I've been wanting to do a podcast episode about this. So I think this kind of prepped us a little bit. So maybe we'll, in the next month or two,
dive into the science a little bit more and make sure that we have something really chewy to give to people.
Sure. Yeah, no, I enjoyed that conversation. I guess the other thing, maybe just to take a little bit of a step back before we move on, is as we were talking about earlier, a lot of shochu pre-war, relatively post-war, was bottled at 30 or 35% alcohol. And I
Right.
think for you and I, in our experience, as we've gone and we've worked with distilleries, um, we found that a lot of shochu actually expresses best at 30 or 35% rather than at
Yeah.
25%.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are modern brands that have been developed for 25%, and those might not work best at higher proof. Um, but that's been an interesting exploration, and we have found brands that are, yeah, 25 is the one, right? And then there are some that we like, oh, this is better at 30, this is better at 35.
Yeah.
And of course, this is our perspective as Americans, maybe a Japanese palate, and their experience with drinking shochu might be different, right? And with the food that it's going with and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So yeah. Anyway, just a, so it's not that as it's this strange it's this dance between regulatory, tax, consumer demand,
Yeah, this is cat and mouse.
profit. Like there's all these different competing interests that get into why something's diluted to a specific point. You and I recently had a Kastori shochu that was bottled at 21% alcohol, and we
Yep.
were like, why 21? And I guarantee you that that's better at a higher proof. I guarantee you.
Yep.
It was decent. It was decent. It was drinkable. I finished the bottle, but it's I guarantee that's better at higher proof. So and
Speaking
then
of, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No.
It was just somebody just posted on Instagram I think it might have been our friend John McCarthy, the chef who works with the New York Japanese Restaurant Association. He one of the barley shochus that he's sipping on recently is 27% bottled in the
Mm-hmm.
States.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you just get these oddball dilutions sometimes. It's not always a five degree increment. So anyway,
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and as the tax regime has been harmonized, it's not punitive to raise the ABV a little bit anymore. So
yeah,
we are seeing more stuff come out like that. Um, just I'm gonna mute myself for a second. I'll be right back. Can you talk about the home
yeah,
cocktail challenge real quick?
yeah, yeah. We hadn't talked about this in a couple of weeks, I guess, but we had come up with the concept of a home cocktail competition. March 1st deadline. So come up with a home cocktail. Send us the recipes. We're going to pick the top five just based on what the recipes are. And Christopher and I are going to meet in a bar somewhere, probably in Fukuoka or in Tokyo, have the bartender make the drinks for us, and we're going to pick a winner, and there will be prizes. And we are going to build out a page for maybe it'll even have a submission sort of link or something. We'll figure it out. We're
Uh
not
huh.
we're not web designers. At least I'm not.
I'm a hobbyist, but yeah, we can figure out a way for you to submit your stuff. It might just be a Google form or something, but still,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
I think
we
the
are we
only good.
we
Yeah.
are we are looking forward to seeing what people come up with. So and we're going to quantify what the prizes are soon too, and we promise that you won't be disappointed.
Yeah. And I guess the only rule that we've come up with so far is that if you're going to make a cocktail, it has to be from ingredients that are going to be available at the bar that we go to, because that otherwise you're disqualified. Because if we can't
Or
make
that
the
we
drink,
can or that we can bring with us pretty easily. Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
no
no like,
crazy tinctures or anything.
yeah, exactly. It's got to be from ingredients that a standard cocktail bar would have uh, easily at hand or could replicate.
Mm-hmm.
So no, 6-month macerations or, you know, as Mark Carlson, I think, says a lot of his things go for years.
Yeah,
None of
sure,
this.
sure, sure. That's
I'm
that's
sure
a
they're great. I'm sure they're great.
yeah. But this is meant to be the home bartending challenge,
Yeah,
so it's stuff that can be replicated across the world and across
yep,
time zones that other people
sure.
can copy or riff off of. So let's for because okay, let's give a hint or two here. And you do a lot of home cocktail mixing.
Hmm.
If you were to think about constructing a new cocktail, for whatever the reason might be, or for whatever the inspiration, can you just talk about like what are the parts of a decent cocktail, or what are some of the things that the classic cocktails all contain? Is it the acid? Is it the, what are the things that need to sort of be taken into consideration and balanced out?
Yeah, great question. And I'm still learning these things myself, but I think from as I've reflected more on it, the drinks that I enjoy best, and I think the ones that are probably most popular, are the ones that are balanced. So they can't be too acidic or too sweet or too
Mm-hmm.
one note, right? You can't have a one note cocktail. That
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't work. So you need to, and these things play with each other, and there can be things that enhance each other, and there are things that contrast. It's a little bit like wine pairings, right? There are wines that completely change how the dish expresses, and there are wines that will elevate the flavor of the food.
Mm-hmm.
So cocktails can work in similar ways. I tend to like the ones that enhance,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why I think when I talked about my Christmas cocktail was the Alaska with sweet
Yeah.
potato shochu and yellow chartreuse. The the way that those two work together is just so fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes each of them more interesting than they were as individual drinks. And that's a very simple cocktail, but it works really, really well. And then you're also going to be talking about proportions, right? You don't want to put too much of something, and that's the balance that I mentioned. But, you know, there's the 50-50 martini, let's use as an example. That's a very old style of martini when you're talking about half vermouth, half gin.
That's a
And
lot
that
of vermouth.
it's yeah, and not very much gin. It becomes a lower proof cocktail, so you can have more than one without, you know, your elbow hitting the bar or
Yeah,
whatever
sure, sure.
expression we might use.
Or not hitting the
Um,
bar when you, how many,
when you miss,
that's always the
yeah.
first sign.
But then you can take that same martini and you can go all the way to, depending on the gin, you can go all the way to 4, 5, 6 to 1 and still have a pretty drink. Now, when
Yep.
you get to a very dry martini, you're just drinking cold gin. Let's be honest. The
Yeah.
vermouth is not contributing, and as I've played around with dilution, not dilution, with proportions in martinis, I've realized the mouthfeel, the texture that the vermouth brings to the party. So I don't like a very dry martini anymore. I want some of
Ah,
that texture and mouthfeel from the
yeah, you
vermouth.
don't want just a wash, a
Exactly.
vermouth wash. You want it
Yep.
still in the glass. This, I think,
Yep.
Robert Simonson just did one of his newsletters about this
Hmm.
martinis in Spain, 5 different martinis or
Oh,
something.
nice. Yeah,
Yeah,
and David
so
Wondrich had last year did his perfect martini recipe, and that's the one that I've
that's
now
right.
started using.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
but you need a 47% gin to make that recipe easily anyway. He gives the proportions and how you have to change it. There's math involved. Nobody wants to do math when they're making a martini. So just get a
Can't the smartphone do
47%
it for you?
gin.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but that's part of it is that texture, the mouthfeel is, so don't ignore that component when you're building your drink, when you're making your own cocktail. It's got to feel nice. It's got to have chewiness, or it's got to have some velvetyness, or it's got to have something going on. And you're not going to get that by just mixing spirits, right? There's got to be some liqueur, some simple syrup,
Right.
something else to add.
Yeah,
Even
yeah,
some
yeah.
citrus, some fresh citrus juice can do that as well. So,
Well, okay, so there you go. That's what I was looking for. These different, the main constituents
hmm
of a of a cocktail. For me, obviously, we're talking shochu and awamori, so that's got to be one of the main groups that's going into this, right?
yep,
Shochu or
right,
awamori.
yep,
You've got acids, so citrus components. You've
hmm
got sweeteners,
hmm
right? Those are 3 big groups that you can start to build from.
yep,
And then you have bitters,
yep,
which are, another way of balancing out sweetness and
hmm
also taming heat
hmm
in certain ways, or in certain cases masking heat.
hmm
But yeah, start to play around at home. And as Steven was talking about the what he just talked about, the riff on the Alaska, which is not
hmm
a super well known cocktail, but a very good one.
hmm
That's a great way to start, is to
yep,
take something that is, you can go online and just plug in whatever you have at home or have easy access to at home, plug it into one of these recipe generators, and it'll tell you what you can make in terms of known cocktail recipes, and start from
hmm
there. And then
yep,
you're subbing out, you might be subbing out the gin or subbing
hmm
out the vodka or even subbing out the whiskey or
hmm
cognac,
Mhm.
and then start from there. And you probably won't hit on something amazing the first time, but you'll get to something workable pretty quick,
Mhm.
and then keep iterating, and then at some point you're gonna have an aha moment, and then
Yep.
wait a second, if I separate this egg and I shake the shit out of it, oh, that makes this it gives this a lot of body and
Yeah.
makes it really interesting.
Well,
And hey, there you go. Who knows
yeah.
what could happen?
Fizzes are made with that egg, right? And that
Yep.
makes a beautiful mouthfeel. That's a texture component and body, right? Just like maybe a little bit of a cheat code is if you end up making a drink that's too bitter with your current ratios, and you've used either a lemon or an orange peel as your garnish, try grapefruit peel.
Okay.
A grapefruit peel will, because the bitterness of a grapefruit peel is so strong, it immediately numbs your bitter receptors, so the drink
Huh.
becomes sweeter.
That's interesting.
The drink's no less bitter. It's actually more bitter because of the grapefruit.
Because of the grapefruit. Yeah, right.
Grapefruit has knocked out the receptors,
I
so you
didn't
can
know
now
that
enjoy the
trick.
drink. Yep. So that's a
I
little
was
bit
having a
of
hard
a
time computing that one. I was like, I did not know that you could make things less bitter with a grapefruit.
right. Yeah. It was
That's cool.
counterintuitive to me until I experimented with it, and it's like, ooh, wow, that works.
That's interesting.
Because I get a lot of bitterness out of a Campari, for example. Even though it's got a lot of sugar in it, it's still a bitter, right? It's an Amaro,
Yeah.
and you spritz a little grapefruit peel in there, and you get a different experience. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and Mark again chimed in about the art of bitters. Bitters are a beautiful world.
Yep.
I've got a few different ones here. I got my little thing of shoots and bitters, key Japanese arboreal bitters, which is inspired by Mizu Shochu, and that's who I received it from. I've got some bittermans here, and I've got my little thing from Devil's Larder. Bitters are fun,
Hmm. Yep.
and just mixing bitters with water and as a drink is kind of sometimes it's fun to see how it
Yeah.
expresses like that.
Yeah. We
But yeah,
can.
this is talk about cheat codes. Bitters are cheat codes, man. You
Oh,
can do
sure.
so
Absolutely.
much with these.
Yep. My actually, I'm sorry I didn't mention it on the podcast episode on mindful drinking that we just released, because that's been my because you were talking about how you would, you try to drink a glass of water for each drink that you have.
Sure.
Back in the day when I was in New York, and the bartenders never, in a busy New York City bar, never wants to just give you a glass of water after glass of water because they're busy, right?
Uh
So
huh.
what I would do is I would order bitters and soda and have them add it to my check,
Uh huh.
right? Because you're taking that just a couple dashes of bitters, add some flavor to that sparkling water. You gotta, and it tastes like you're still drinking, but there's so little alcohol in it, even though
Yeah.
bitters contain alcohol. So
That's
that's a
a
nice way
great.
to
That's a
hydrate and have a
yeah.
refreshing drink at the same time.
Garrett Ryan has a great question. Would a homemade fruit infused simple syrup that takes 30 minutes to make be in play?
I would
Simple
think
syrup?
yes.
Yeah,
You're
that's
make
something you can do at the bar.
Yeah, making simple syrup is fine. And then I was actually thinking like, because you can even throw like herbs or other ingredients into a syrup as you're making it to add that flavor. So I don't have a problem with something like that. Um, if it gets too crazy and it's an ingredient that we can't easily procure in Japan, then it's just going to make it hard for you to win because if we can't replicate what it is you've created. So I guess maybe don't overthink it too much,
Don't
or
overthink it.
keep it simple.
Um, and and Mark, thank you for that, Garrett, over on Facebook. Mark on YouTube says grapefruit. Yuzu could maybe do the same thing. Maybe that's something to
Interesting.
try as well. Yeah,
Yeah. I will
interesting.
tell you that kabosu does not. Kabosu is just way too sweet. That's the citrus from Oita that I
Yeah.
love.
Uh
I
huh.
put that in cocktails a lot actually, but it does not play the same role as grapefruit. But that's an interesting idea.
It is. So, yeah, let us know. If you have any questions, you can DM us pretty much anywhere, but I recommend sticking to Twitter and Instagram because that's where we spend the bulk of our time. And, you know, if you just to ask for an email address, that's fine too.
Yep.
But we'll keep hammering this. We're going to keep talking about it little by little.
Mhm.
And so hopefully by the time we get to the end of the entry period, which is basically the end of next month, we'll have a good dozen or so entries. That would be nice. If it's more than that, then great. The more, the merrier. And we'll rope some poor bartender into helping us decide the winner. I'm sure it'll be a good story anyway. So
we might want to live stream that, or at least record it for posterity.
Yeah, we're gonna need to. That'll be an episode in and of itself. I'm sure there's a podcast in there somewhere too.
Yeah.
All right.
I think I thought of something and now I forgot. So never mind.
No.
We'll talk about it another time when it comes back.
We're rubbing up against the 1 hour mark here. This is one of our longest ones ever. So at least between the two of us, we haven't done a 55-minute episode in years. So
just like we hadn't done an hour and 20-minute podcast before.
And that's what came out. Yeah, no kidding. All right, maybe we're getting.
It is shorter than that. It is shorter than that. We had.
Oh yeah. No. It's succinct. It's
We got it.
You'll barely notice it. Okay, so I guess we'll.
It is 1 hour 33 seconds long.
1 hour and 33 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So break it up.
All right. Yeah, it's 2 train rides.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, we're gonna call it a morning there, at least morning in Tokyo. So we're not even gonna get into our newly opened or bottle kill this week. We are. We are. Oh, I was
mine.
Kidding.
I had it right here.
Oh.
So it's funny we talk about dilution because
okay.
this is an undiluted sweet potato shochu, 41% alcohol, from Oishi Shuzo in Kagoshima, who you visited not that long ago. Maybe we can talk about that on a future episode. I tried this at the big show that was in Fukuoka this summer in July. Loved it. But I had it on the rocks last night, and I have to be honest, it was okay. And what I realized from this conversation, because it's undiluted, there's no mouthfeel.
Sure.
And my ice just
hollow.
Didn't do the job. And so I will try a twice up. I will try an oyuwari, and I have a feeling it's going to be beautiful because it's a lovely drink. But can you pronounce it? What's it called?
That's June something.
I think it actually starts with the kura here.
Oh, is that? Oh, it's okay. There, that's
Kura,
part of the name. Okay.
Kura June something or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, we'll figure out the name. I should have known, but good stuff. I can't always read kanji. Sorry. And there's no English on the back label at all. It's interesting. They hand stamped the ABV. It says 41%, but it looks like it can be anything. So apparently it varies by distillation season.
I'm sure.
Junsui.
Yeah, Junsui makes sense.
Yeah. So really, really nice. The first time I had seen it was at that trade show or the Shochu show, and I like it. Anyway.
Problem with kanji is it's written with all these little lines. So yeah, thank you, Richard. And thank you for watching this Sake Future Summit too. So that's gonna do it for today, everybody. I think we're good.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Right. Yeah, no worries. I got another call. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for chiming in for another episode, another edition of Shochu'sday. We'll be back in 7 days' time, same place. Until then, from both of us here in Japan to all of you out there all around the world, a very hearty and heartfelt kanpai.
Kanpai.